The whole city could not stop talking about one wedding. It was the marriage between Mr. Raymond, a rich old billionaire, and Clara Evans, a young music teacher from a small town. The news spread everywhere. Newspapers, TV channels, and gossip magazines. People said it was the most shocking wedding of the year. How could a billionaire marry a woman who had no money, no name, and no status? Everyone had the same answer. She must have married him for his money. Clara stood at the church gate that morning, dressed in a simple white gown. Her brown hair was tied neatly, and her soft eyes looked calm but nervous. She could hear the whispers behind her. "That's her," someone said. "She's the gold digger. She was a piano teacher, right? She probably played her way into his heart." Another voice laughed. Clara heard it all, but she didn't reply. She just smiled politely and held her bouquet tighter. Her heart was beating fast, but not because of fear. It was because she truly loved Raymond. Raymond was in his late 60s, kind-faced and calm. He had lost his wife many years ago and lived alone in a giant mansion. When he first met Clara, he had walked into her small music studio by accident. He was lonely and wanted to learn how to play piano again. Clara had treated him like any other student. She never cared about his money or name. She talked to him about music, life, and hope. Slowly, he found comfort in her voice and honesty, and one day he said, "You make me feel alive again." Clara. When he proposed, Clara didn't say yes right away. She knew people would misunderstand. She said, "Raymond, the world will never believe my heart." But Raymond smiled and held her hand. He said softly, "Let them talk, only we know the truth." And that was enough for her. Now, standing at the altar, Clara looked at Raymond and felt peace. But when she turned her eyes toward his family, she saw nothing but cold stares. His 3 children, Lucas, Anna, and Peter, sat with tight faces. They didn't smile, they didn't clap. Anna whispered something into Lucas's ear, and both rolled their eyes, even during the ceremony. Clara could feel their anger. They believed she was stealing their father's money. They didn't see love, and they saw danger. After the ceremony, the press surrounded them outside the church. Flashlights burst everywhere. "Clara, how does it feel to marry one of the richest men in the city?" A reporter shouted. "Are you happy about your new life of luxury?" Another asked. Clara tried to answer kindly. "I'm happy to marry the man I love." But her soft voice was lost under the noise. Raymond stepped in front of her and said firmly, "That's enough. Please let my wife be." He took her hand and guided her to the car. For a moment, Clara felt safe again. At the reception, the mansion looked grand, filled with flowers and light. But even there, the tension followed her. The guests smiled politely, but behind those smiles, Clara could feel their judgment. She overheard a group of women whispering. "She must have planned this," one said. "I heard she was teaching him piano. And now look, she's the new Mrs. Raymond." Clara's chest tightened. But she stayed quiet. She had promised herself she would never fight with words. Only truth and time could prove her heart. Raymond gave a short speech during dinner. He thanked everyone for coming and then looked at Clara with warmth. "She brought back music into my life," he said, "and for that, I am grateful." His words made Clara's eyes shine. She felt loved even if the world didn't see it. Later that night, when the guests had gone, Clara walked alone in the garden. The soft lights touched her white dress. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I hope I can make them see who I really am." She didn't want the wealth, the fame, or the mansion. She just wanted peace and love inside the house. She could still hear the laughter of the guests fading. But from one of the upstairs windows, Anna watched her quietly, her eyes filled with anger. "She's not going to stay here long," Anna muttered to herself. "She'll regret stepping into this family." At that same moment, Clara bent down to pick a small white rose that had fallen on the grass. She held it close and smiled softly. She didn't know that this house, this new life, would test her heart more than anything before. She didn't know that soon she would stand in the same room with everyone who hated her, and in front of them, she would prove her love not with words, but with music. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Clara sat beside Raymond in his study. He held her hand and said, "Ignore them, my dear. They don't know your soul." Clara nodded gently and whispered, "I will not give up, I promise." Outside, the rain began to fall softly. The mansion lights shimmered through the glass, and the world continued to whisper, but Clara's heart stayed quiet. Steady and full of love after the wedding, Clara stepped into her new home. The Raymond estate. It was huge, with long marble halls, tall windows, and portraits of serious-looking ancestors staring down at her. Everything inside was beautiful but cold. The air felt heavy, like it carried secrets no one wanted to tell. The staff greeted her politely, but their smiles were fake. They bowed because they had to, not because they wanted to. Clara walked slowly through the hall, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. She looked around at the shining chandeliers and gold-framed paintings, but what she noticed most was the silence. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that made her feel alone. Raymond held her hand as they walked toward the grand staircase. "Welcome home, my dear," he said softly. Clara smiled, but her heart felt uneasy. She could already feel the distance between her and everyone else in this house. At dinner that evening, the family gathered for the first time since the wedding. Lucas, Anna, and Peter sat at the long dining table with cold eyes. The servants brought in food, but no one talked much. Clara tried to start a friendly conversation. She asked Anna about her art gallery, and Peter about his new job, but their answers were short and sharp. Lucas didn't even look at her. He just cut his steak quietly and said, "So how does it feel to be rich overnight?" The word stung like a knife. Raymond frowned. "Lucas, that's enough," he said. But Clara quickly smiled and whispered, "It's all right." She didn't want to cause trouble. Later that night, when the family left the table, Clara sat alone for a while. She could still hear the servants whispering near the kitchen. "She's so young," one said. "She must have planned this for years." Another added. Clara stood up quietly and walked to the piano in the corner of the room. She sat down and began to play a soft tune, the same melody she used to play for Raymond in her small studio. The sound filled the mansion. It was warm, gentle, and full of emotion. Even the servants stopped to listen for a moment. It was as if the house itself had begun to breathe again. Raymond entered the room, smiling. "That's my Clara," he said proudly. "Your music makes everything come alive." She looked up at him and smiled. "Music always makes me feel at home." But as she played, she didn't notice Anna standing behind the doorway. Watching her, Anna's eyes were full of jealousy. "She's acting so innocent," she whispered to herself. "She's fooling Father. But I'll find out what she's really hiding." Days turned into weeks, and the mansion became colder for Clara. Raymond often rested because of his weak heart. She spent most of her time reading to him, cooking for him, and playing music beside his bed. But when she walked around the mansion alone, she could feel the staff watching her from a distance. They stopped talking whenever she entered the room. They gave her polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes one morning. Clara walked into Raymond's study and found Lucas going through some old papers. He looked surprised to see her. "Oh, Mrs. Raymond," he said with fake politeness. "Just making sure Father's business is safe." Clara nodded. "Of course," she said softly. He stepped closer and looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't trust you," he said quietly. "And I never will." Clara froze for a second, but then she smiled gently. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she replied. "But I'll still be kind to you." Lucas laughed coldly and walked away. His words stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. That evening, Clara went to the music room again. She opened the piano cover and placed her fingers gently on the keys. As she played, she thought of her old life, her small house, her students, the laughter, and the peace she once had. Here, everything was beautiful but lonely. She didn't have friends, and she didn't have trust. Only music felt real. Raymond came in later, coughing softly. She stopped playing and ran to him. "Are you all right?" He nodded. "Yes, my dear, just tired." He sat beside her and smiled weakly. "Promise me something," he said. "No matter what happens, never stop playing that song. It reminds me of the life we dreamed of." Clara held his hand and promised, "I will never stop." A few days later, Raymond's health grew worse. He began staying in bed most of the time. The doctors came and went whispering in the hallway. The children visited often now, but not out of love. They wanted to know about the will. Clara heard them arguing one night. "She's going to take everything," Anna said angrily. Peter replied, "We need to make sure Father doesn't change anything." Clara stood behind the door, tears filling her eyes. She didn't want any of their money. She only wanted their peace. One night the storm outside was loud. The thunder shook the windows and the mansion lights flickered. Clara sat beside Raymond's bed. Holding his hand, he smiled weakly and whispered, You've brought light into this dark house." She smiled back. "And you've given me a home." He closed his eyes, and she continued to play the soft melody on the small piano in his room. The sound mixed with the rain. It was peaceful and sad at the same time. Outside the room, Anna stood again by the door. Listening, her face was pale. "She's acting like an angel," she whispered bitterly. "But I'll show everyone who she really is." And as the night grew darker, Clara played on. The house that once hated her began to echo with her music. But she didn't know that soon this melody would become part of a much deeper story, a story of love, lies, and the truth hidden in her song. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. Gray clouds covered the sky above the Raymond estate, and the wind carried a strange heaviness. It had been only 3 days since Mr. Raymond had passed away. The mansion that once echoed with Clara's piano now stood silent. No music, no laughter, only whispers, footsteps, and grief mixed with suspicion. Clara stood by the window in her black dress, holding a small photograph of Raymond in her hands. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry anymore. She had cried all night beside his bed when he took his last breath. He had smiled at her one last time and whispered, "Don't be afraid, my love. The truth will speak for you." Those words kept replaying in her mind. Now she had no one by her side. Downstairs, the lawyer, Mr. Collins, was setting up in the large hall for the reading of the will. The family had gathered, Lucas, Anna, Peter, and a few close friends of Raymond. Everyone sat with tense faces, pretending to be sad, but their eyes were sharp with greed. When Clara entered the hall, all eyes turned to her. The whispers began again. "She's dressed like a widow already," someone murmured. "She won't be crying once she gets the money," another said. Clara walked past them quietly, her steps soft, her heart heavy. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Raymond Arthur Williams." He looked around the room and added, "Mr. Raymond requested this reading be done in his mansion." With all family members present, the family nodded impatiently. Lucas leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Anna's lips curled into a cold smile. Peter tapped his fingers on the table, waiting to hear how much he would get. Mr. Collins opened a thick envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. He began reading slowly. "To my dear children, Lucas, Anna, and Peter, you have all been given enough over the years, and I trust you will use what you already have wisely." The siblings looked confused. Lucas frowned. Anna's eyes widened. Peter's hand stopped tapping. Mr. Collins continued, "To my loving wife, Clara Evans Williams, you came into my life when I had forgotten what peace felt like. Your kindness gave me music again, your heart gave me hope." The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Clara, waiting to hear how much she would get. But then Mr. Collins read the next line. "As for my wealth and assets, I leave the majority of my fortune to the Raymond Foundation, which supports children's education and music." Gasps filled the room. Lucas stood up. "What?" he shouted. "That can't be right." Anna's voice rose. "You mean she gets nothing?" Mr. Collins calmly lifted his hand. "Please, let me finish." He read the final part slowly. "To my wife, Clara, I leave a small locked box kept in my study, and the key to it is in the envelope marked with her name. She will know what to do." Everyone turned toward Clara. Their shock turned into mockery. Anna laughed bitterly. "A box? That's all she gets?" Peter smirked. "Guess the gold digger lost her game." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed calm. She stood up and walked to Mr. Collins, who handed her the small envelope. Inside, she found a tiny golden key and a folded note. The note had Raymond's handwriting. It said, "For the one who truly loved me, play our song when they doubt you." Clara pressed the note to her heart. Lucas noticed and scoffed. "Still playing the act, huh?" "You fooled father, but not us," Mr. Collins warned him. "That's enough, Lucas." But the anger in the room grew louder. Anna stepped forward. "You wanted his money, now look at you, holding a key like it's treasure." Clara looked at her quietly. "I never wanted his money," she said softly. But no one believed her. The storm outside had started again, thunder rumbling in the distance. Clara turned to Mr. Collins and said politely, "May I see the box?" He nodded and guided her to the study. The family followed behind. Still whispering, still judging inside the study, the air smelled of old books and memories. On the desk sat a small wooden box carved with tiny musical notes. Clara's hands trembled as she placed the golden key into the lock. Everyone leaned closer, expecting gold, jewels, or hidden property papers, but when the box opened, it only held another envelope. Inside was a single letter and a small silver pendant in the shape of a piano key. Anna laughed out loud. "That's it. A necklace? What a joke." But Mr. Collins looked serious. "This is Raymond's handwriting again," he said. "Would you like to read it aloud, Mrs. Williams?" Clara nodded and opened the letter. Her hands shaking, she read softly, "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I know the world will never understand our love, but I don't need them to. When they judge you, play our song. The truth will reveal itself." Tears filled her eyes as she finished. She folded the letter carefully and held it close. The others rolled their eyes and began leaving. "Such drama," Anna muttered. "I'm done with this," Lucas stormed out of the room. Peter followed, mumbling something about lawyers and rights. Only Clara and Mr. Collins remained. He looked at her kindly and said, "He truly loved you." "Mrs. Williams," Clara smiled weakly. "Yes, and I loved him too." She looked at the piano key pendant and the small letter again. Then she whispered to herself, "Play our song when they doubt you." That night, as the family argued in the other rooms, Clara walked slowly to the grand piano in the hall. The mansion was silent again. She placed the pendant beside her and began to play the melody, soft, emotional, full of love and pain. The music rose and fell like a heartbeat, echoing through the walls. And though no one knew it yet, that song would soon uncover a truth that would change everything. The night after the will reading was long and silent. The wind blew through the tall trees outside the Raymond estate. Rain tapped against the windows like a soft rhythm. Inside the mansion, Clara sat near the piano, staring at the small wooden box on the table. It was the only thing Raymond had left for her. A box that everyone laughed at, but to her it meant everything. The golden key still lay in her hand, warm from her touch. She read the letter again, the words that kept echoing in her heart. "For the one who truly loved me, play our song when they doubt you." She whispered those words softly. "What song, Raymond?" She asked the empty room. "What did you want me to find?" Her eyes moved to the piano, the same grand piano where she had played countless nights for him. Something inside her told her the answer was there. She stood up slowly and walked to the piano. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. She lifted the piano lid and ran her fingers over the keys. They were cold at first, but then she began to play the melody, their song. The tune was soft and full of memories. It was the song Raymond loved most, the one he called home as she played. The sound filled the room like a whisper from the past. Suddenly, she heard a faint click from somewhere under the piano. She stopped playing and looked down. Her heart began to race. She knelt beside the instrument and touched the wooden panel near the pedals. There was a tiny keyhole almost invisible. Her eyes widened. "The key," she whispered. "This must be what he meant." She took the golden key and slid it carefully into the hidden lock. It fit perfectly. With a small turn, the panel opened slightly. Inside was a hidden compartment covered in dust. Clara's hands shook as she pulled out a flat envelope wrapped in velvet. She placed it on the table and slowly opened it. Inside were several documents and another letter written by Raymond. Her eyes filled with tears as she read, "My beloved Clara, if you are reading this, you have followed the song of truth. Inside this envelope is something I kept hidden. Not from you, but from those who could never understand love without money." Clara's breath trembled. She continued reading. "This is the second part of my will, the one no one knows about. The money in these accounts is not for wealth. It is for music, for kindness, for dreams you once told me you had. A small school for children who cannot afford lessons." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You told me once that music can heal a broken heart. Now I want your music to heal others." Clara pressed the letter to her chest. The truth was in her hands now. Raymond hadn't left her money for herself. He had trusted her to continue his dream. A dream built on love, not greed. She looked at the bank papers inside the envelope. There were millions in donations under her name. The Clara Music Foundation. Her hands trembled. Not because of the amount, but because of what it meant. Raymond had believed in her even after his death. But outside the study door, someone else was listening. Anna stood in the dark hallway, her face pale with anger. She had seen Clara open the secret panel. She had heard part of Raymond's letter through the door, her hands clenched into fists. "So that's what she's hiding," Anna whispered bitterly. "She's pretending to be kind, but she's stealing from us again." The next morning, the house was buzzing with gossip. Anna told her brothers everything, twisting the truth. "She found a secret will," she said. "She's taking Father's hidden money. Millions, under her name." Lucas's eyes burned with fury. Peter slammed his hand on the table. "I knew it," he shouted. "She fooled us all." They decided to confront her. Not with calm, but with anger. Clara was in the music room when they stormed in. Lucas shouted first, "Where is it?" "Where's the hidden will?" Clara turned, startled. "What are you talking about?" Anna threw the open velvet envelope on the piano. "This," she said coldly. "You thought you could hide this from us?" Clara picked it up carefully. "This isn't for me," she said softly. "It's for the Music Foundation for Children." "Lies." Peter yelled. "You're just acting like you care." "But it's all about money." Clara stepped back. Her heart breaking again, she wanted to explain. But their hatred was too strong. Anna's voice shook with anger. "You think playing piano makes you special? You think Father loved you more than us?" Clara's voice was calm. "He didn't love anyone less. He just saw the truth in people's hearts." Her words made Anna's face turn red with rage. Lucas shouted, "You'll regret ever stepping into this house." And with that, they left, slamming the door behind them. Clara sank onto the piano bench. Tears falling onto her hands, she whispered to herself, "I don't need them to believe me, I only need to keep his promise." She looked at the letter again. Raymond's words seemed to glow on the paper. "Play our song when they doubt you." She touched the piano key pendant around her neck. It shone softly in the sunlight coming through the window. That night, Clara wrote a letter to Mr. Collins. She explained everything and attached the hidden documents. She wanted everything to be legal, honest, and public. She didn't care if she lost everything. She only wanted to protect Raymond's name and his dream. When she finished, she sat by the piano again and began to play. The same song that had unlocked the secret. Her fingers moved gently over the keys. The music filled the empty rooms. And even though the house was full of anger and lies, Clara's melody carried something pure, a quiet truth that no one could destroy. The sun had barely risen over the Raymond estate. A thin mist wrapped around the garden, making the mansion look like a ghost of itself. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and heavy. The news had spread quickly. Clara had discovered a hidden will. By morning, everyone in the city was talking again. Maybe she found secret gold, they said. Maybe she tricked the old man after all. Clara sat in her room, holding the piano key pendant in her palm. She had barely slept. Her mind was full of memories. Raymond's soft voice, his tired smile, and the promise she made to him. Never stop playing our song. Those words were now her only strength. A loud knock echoed on her door. It was Mr. Collins, the family lawyer, looking uneasy. "Mrs. Williams," he said softly. "The family has asked for a second meeting. They want everyone to be there." Clara understood what that meant. "They want to humiliate me," she said quietly. He nodded slightly but added, "They're calling it a final clarification about the will. It will happen this evening in the Great Hall." That evening, the mansion was full again. The children had invited friends, relatives, and even some reporters. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to show the world that Clara was nothing more than a liar. As guests arrived, whispers filled the air like smoke. "She's finished now," one woman said. "I always knew she was acting innocent," another replied. Clara walked down the staircase slowly, wearing a simple black dress. She didn't look angry or afraid, only calm. Her soft steps echoed through the hall. Anna, Lucas, and Peter stood by the long table, their faces sharp and cold. Lucas spoke first. "We called everyone here for the truth, to show what this woman has done." He looked at Clara with disgust. She hid Father's money, pretended to be kind, and now she wants to take what isn't hers. Mr. Collins stepped forward nervously. "Please, Mr. Lucas." "I can explain." But Anna cut him off. "No need. The truth will speak tonight." She turned toward Clara. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Clara looked around the hall, seeing the crowd of judging faces. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "But I won't say it with words." The room went silent. Clara walked toward the grand piano in the corner, the same piano she used to play for Raymond every night. Her fingers brushed over the keys gently. She sat down and whispered, "He told me to play when they doubt me." Everyone watched. Confused, Lucas folded his arms. "What is this drama now?" he muttered. But then the first notes filled the room, soft, trembling, and full of emotion. It was their song, the melody that Raymond had loved. Each note carried a piece of her heart. Her love, her loss, her truth. At first, people didn't react. They stood in silence, listening. Then something strange began to happen as the melody grew deeper. The piano produced a faint echo, a sound of metal hitting wood. Clara paused, her eyes widening. She bent down and noticed something glowing under the piano's frame. She stopped playing and whispered, "Raymond." Mr. Collins rushed forward. He touched the wooden panel under the piano and found a second hidden compartment. It had a small latch with the same pattern as the pendant around Clara's neck. She quickly took it off and pressed it against the slot. It clicked open. Inside was a sealed glass case with another letter and a USB drive. The crowd leaned forward. Lucas frowned. "What is that?" Mr. Collins carefully opened the envelope and read aloud, "To whoever listens, this message will prove what words could not. My wife, Clara Evans Williams, is the only person who stood by me without asking for anything. She never took my money, never asked for power. She gave me love and peace when no one else cared." Gasps filled the room. Anna's face turned pale. Lucas tried to interrupt. That letter could be fake. But Mr. Collins raised a hand. "There's more." He plugged the USB into the projector screen in the hall. A video appeared. Raymond's voice filled the room, calm and steady. He was sitting at his desk, smiling weakly. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he said. "And if my children are here, I hope you understand what real love means someday. Clara asked for nothing. She gave me music when I had silence, and light when I had darkness." He paused and smiled sadly. "The account in her name is for charity, to teach music to children who cannot afford it." That was her dream, not mine. Clara covered her mouth, tears falling down her face. The crowd was silent. For the first time, no one could speak. Raymond's voice continued, "To my children, I leave wisdom. Love is not measured by money, and truth cannot be hidden forever." The video ended. The hall stayed quiet. Only the sound of rain outside broke the silence. Anna looked down, her lips trembling. Peter turned away, unable to meet Clara's eyes. Lucas stepped forward slowly, his anger fading into shame. I didn't know," he said softly. Clara wiped her tears and said gently, "He wanted peace, not war. I never wanted to take anything from you." No one replied. Even the guests who had judged her now looked at her with respect. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Mr. Collins closed the letter and nodded at Clara. "Your husband was a wise man," he said quietly. Clara smiled sadly. "He believed in love more than money." She sat at the piano again and began to play once more. This time the melody sounded brighter, peaceful, forgiving, beautiful. The crowd listened silently. Even Anna wiped her tears secretly. As the last note faded, the rain stopped. The mansion felt warm for the first time since Raymond's death. The air that was once filled with hate now carried music. Music that told the truth, music that healed. Clara stood up and whispered, "Thank you, Raymond." She looked around the hall. The people who once hated her now looked at her differently. Some with guilt, some with admiration. But Clara didn't need their approval anymore. She had done what Raymond asked. She had played their song, and in that song, the truth had finally spoken. The morning after the piano performance was soft and golden. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Raymond estate. For the first time in weeks, the mansion didn't feel heavy. It felt quiet, peaceful, almost alive again. Clara sat by the piano, still wearing the same black dress from the night before. Her eyes were tired, but her heart felt lighter. The video of Raymond's message had changed everything. News of it had already spread through the city. The newspapers that once called her a gold digger now printed a new headline. "Billionaire's wife proves love was real. Hidden will reveals charity dream." But Clara didn't care about the news. All she cared about was that Raymond's truth had finally been heard. Mr. Collins arrived early that morning. Carrying some papers in his hand, he smiled gently. "Mrs. Williams, I have something you should see." He laid the documents on the piano. "These are the official letters Raymond wrote before his passing. Sealed in my office for months." Clara blinked in surprise. More letters. He nodded. Yes, these reveal what he truly planned before his death. Clara opened the first envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written in Raymond's neat handwriting. My dearest Clara, I knew there would come a time when you would stand alone against the world. People fear what they don't understand, and love without reason scares them most. I had to protect you. But I also wanted to protect the goodness in you. She paused, tears forming again. I created a hidden plan, money in your name, but not for you to keep. It will fund your dream. A music school for children. The Clara Foundation will carry your name not as my wife, but as a woman who gave life to my last days. Clara pressed her hand against her heart. Raymond had thought about every detail, every word, every moment. He hadn't just left her money. He had left her purpose, Mr. Collins continued softly. There's something else you should know, Mrs. Williams. Raymond began the paperwork for this school months before he passed. He never told anyone, not even his children. He said he wanted it to be a surprise for you. Clara smiled through her tears. He always loved surprises, she whispered. She picked up another envelope from the stack. Inside was a small photograph. It showed Raymond sitting at the piano beside a group of smiling children. On the back he had written, Our first class and the beginning of your dream. Clara's hand trembled as she touched the photo. Her voice broke. He started it without telling me, Mr. Collins nodded. Yes, he visited an orphanage last winter. He played with the children and promised them a music school soon. They called it Miss Clara's Dream. Clara wiped her tears, her heart filling with a strange mix of pain and joy. She looked up at the sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, it felt like Raymond was still there, smiling at her while Clara was lost in her memories. The door opened quietly. Anna stepped in, her face pale and eyes swollen from crying. Clara turned, surprised but calm. Anna stood there for a long moment before whispering, I came to say I'm sorry. Her voice was shaky. I said so many cruel things I didn't understand. I thought you came to take him away from us. Clara stood up slowly and walked closer. You loved your father, she said softly. I understand. I would have protected him too if I were in your place. Anna nodded weakly, tears falling. I wish I had known what kind of love you shared with him, she whispered. He looked happier in that video than I'd seen him in years. Clara smiled gently. He wasn't happy because of me, Anna. He was happy because he forgave. Those words made Anna cry harder. She took a deep breath. Please, if you ever open that school, can I help? Clara's eyes softened. Yes, of course. You can. They hugged quietly, and for the first time, the anger between them began to melt away. A few hours later, Lucas and Peter arrived too. They didn't speak much, but their eyes said what their words couldn't. Lucas muttered, I guess we were wrong, Peter added. He really did love you. Clara nodded gently. He loved you too, in his own way. The three siblings stood together for a few moments in silence. The house that had once been filled with hatred now held something new. Forgiveness. That evening, Clara went to Raymond's study. She sat in his old chair, surrounded by books, photos, and memories. She took out her notebook and began writing. She wrote down plans for the Clara Music Foundation, a place where children could learn music for free, a place where Raymond's love could live forever. Outside, the golden light of sunset covered the garden. The flowers that Raymond had planted were blooming again. Clara looked out the window and whispered, You were right. Love doesn't die. It just changes shape. She walked back to the piano and began to play the song again. The same melody that had once revealed a secret. But this time it sounded different. It was no longer a song of sadness. It was a song of peace, of love, of truth. As the music floated through the mansion, the servants stopped to listen. Even they could feel something had changed. The air felt warm, the house felt alive. And though Raymond was gone, his presence filled every corner. Clara smiled through her tears and whispered, You kept your promise, my love. Now it's my turn to keep mine. The melody rose and faded softly. Outside, the first stars began to shine. And in the quiet of that evening, Clara knew the truth. Raymond's love wasn't a memory anymore. It was her future waiting to be lived. Months passed since the storm that once surrounded Clara's life. The Raymond estate, once filled with whispers, anger and doubt, now stood quiet and calm. The walls that had carried judgment now carried music again. Soft tunes floated through the halls every morning, played by children who came to learn. Because Clara had finally opened the Clara Music Foundation, The dream that Raymond had left behind now lived in the laughter and songs of little ones. Every corner of the mansion had changed. The grand hall where the family once fought was now a classroom. Old portraits of Raymond's ancestors were replaced by paintings made by children. The piano where everything had started still stood in the same place, shining under the sunlight. It was no longer a symbol of sorrow, but of hope, and every note that echoed from it was a promise kept. Clara walked through the halls every morning with a gentle smile. She taught the children how to feel music, not just play it. Each note is a heartbeat, she would say softly. Play with kindness, and the world will listen. The children adored her, calling her Miss Clara to them. She wasn't a rich widow. She was a teacher who believed in them, and in their innocent laughter. Clara found her healing one afternoon. As the sun painted the garden in shades of gold, Anna came to visit, carrying flowers in her hands. She looked different now, calmer, gentler. She had started helping with the charity, visiting schools and sharing Raymond's story. Clara greeted her with a warm hug. Anna smiled and said, "Father would have been proud of this place," Clara nodded. "He is proud. I feel him here every day." They walked through the garden together. Children ran past them, laughing, their music books flying in the wind. Anna paused by the old fountain. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think you came to take everything from us. But you gave us something we never had, peace." Clara smiled, tears shining in her eyes. He wanted peace for all of us. That was his wish. They stood there for a long time. Listening to the sound of the piano playing in the distance, it was a melody of hope. The same song Clara had played that night when everything changed. As evening approached, Clara walked alone to Raymond's study. It had remained the same. His chair, his books, his old reading glasses still on the desk. She sat down and looked at his photo. The same gentle smile, the same kind eyes. "Everything you dreamed of is happening," she whispered. "The children are learning. And Anna is helping too." Her voice trembled slightly. "I kept my promise." "Raymond," she opened the drawer of the desk and took out a small velvet box. Inside was the silver piano key pendant he had given her. She held it close and smiled. "This was the key to everything," she said softly. "Not money, not fame, just love." A soft breeze entered through the open window, brushing her hair gently. It felt like a quiet answer, a whisper from the one she missed most that night. Clara organized a small concert at the mansion. The children performed their first recital under candlelight. Guests, neighbors, and even Raymond's sons came to watch. The hall glowed softly as the piano music filled the air. Clara sat in the front row, her heart full of pride and emotion. When the last song ended, the audience stood and clapped. The children bowed, smiling brightly, and Clara wiped her tears quietly after everyone left. Clara sat alone at the grand piano. She touched the keys gently, feeling their warmth. She began to play their song, the melody that had connected her and Raymond forever. The notes were soft, steady, full of peace. Each chord carried a memory, their first lesson, their late-night talks, his laughter, his goodbye. As she played, she whispered, "This is for you." Outside, the night sky was full of stars, shining like small candles of heaven. When the last note faded, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her heart was calm for the first time. She didn't feel alone. She felt him, not as a memory, but as a gentle presence around her. The house was silent again, but it was a peaceful silence, the kind that feels like love, not loneliness. Days later, Clara visited the cemetery. She placed fresh white roses on Raymond's grave and smiled softly. "I used to think goodbye meant the end," she said quietly. "But now I know it means thank you." She touched the stone gently. "Thank you for believing in me when no one did. Thank you for leaving me music instead of money." The wind blew softly, carrying the sound of distant church bells. It felt like a reply. Clara stood up, looked at the horizon, and smiled. Her heart was light, her soul free. She turned back toward the car, the piano pendant shining softly around her neck. As she walked away, the sunlight fell gently over the grave, and for a moment it looked like the world itself was bowing in silence, in honor of a love that outlived everything. That night, Clara returned home. She sat by the piano once more, surrounded by the laughter of children echoing from the rooms above. She whispered, "This is home now," and began to play again. The same song, the same melody, the same promise. Each note was a heartbeat, each sound a memory. And as the final chord faded into the night, Clara smiled through her tears and whispered, "Goodbye, my love, and thank you for the music."